I want you to talk a little about Arthur Page, a brief synopsis of who he was. I know Page was born 1883, and I think he died in 1960.
Yeah, 60, I'm sure of that.
But I want you to give us a brief synopsis of who he was and how the Arthur Page Society,
Yes.
which was an outgrowth of his philosophy, and now the Arthur Page Center at Penn State, and these two important institutions are directly traceable to Arthur Page.
Yes.
So tell us who Arthur Page was.
Well, Arthur Page was, I think the reason he's a big star in the history and the galaxy of public relations is that he, as the head of that function at AT&T in the Bell telephone system, he really institutionalized public relations in a large corporation on a large scale. Of course, his ideas are the most important, but I mean that's now who was Arthur Page? Well, the Page family were very distinguished and at one time, I guess, wealthy North Carolina family, going back before the war. Before the war between the states. His father was one of the founders of a publishing company in New York called Doubleday Page. Doubleday is still an imprint,
Right.
as you know, and so he founded that company after having been editor of the old Harper's Magazine. This is Page's father.
Right.
And he was very much, a political journalist as well. He was a confidant of President Wilson, and he was the U.S. ambassador to the court of St. James, our ambassador.
The father.
The father
Yeah.
was. So a very well-known family, an important family. Arthur Page was graduated from Harvard, made gentleman's C's, and went to work in the family business, Doubleday Page, and did very, very well. Not because his father was on the masthead, but he was a very gifted editor. And one of the books, magazines that he edited, which was his personal joy, was called The World's Work. It was about business and commerce.
Mm-hmm.
But another thing about him that was the first inkling of his development as a public relations counselor was the fact that when his father was the ambassador in England, that was during World War I, or the lead up to World War I and during World War I, Arthur Page would write him letters interpreting the mood of public opinion in the United States on various issues. Those letters were classics, and were spread around the State Department. And in subsequent years, long after his father had retired, U.S. ambassadors all over the world asked him to write them letters explaining the effect of U.S. policy here at home, policies abroad or actions abroad, policy, what the effect was here. And it was brilliant stuff. Very little of it remains, unfortunately, but or the letters themselves, but there's some. Anyway, so that's his background. He was a journalist, he was an editor, and he had a pretty good feel for public opinion. In his book, The World's Work, he wrote an editorial in each edition, a magazine. And he frequently wrote about the accountabilities of management of businesses. And as a matter of fact, the line that the Arthur Page Society uses in its printed materials about all all business in a democratic society. Actually, that was a lift from one of Arthur Page's editorials. That was not something he wrote at AT&T. Anyway, the president of AT&T, this would be, I'm now up to about 1926, I guess. The president of AT&T, who knew of Arthur Page, didn't really know him well, called up Arthur Page and asked him if they could meet. And when they met, the president of AT&T, they didn't use the chairman title in those days. That was before inflation in titles that gripped American corporations. So president was good enough. Yeah. So anyway, they met, and the president, so I'm vamping because I can't remember the president's name. It'll probably come to me after we finish talking. But in any case, he said to Arthur Page, you know, he read his magazine and he was very impressed with his notions about the management accountabilities and that kind of thing. So he said to Page, he said, would you write a book about the Bell telephone system? Would you write a book for us on those, in capturing those ideas? And Page, a little more politely than I'm going to say it, but his response was, look, if you're looking for a flack, you got the wrong guy. He said, you know, a book is nice and it's good for your ego, you know, but I'm not going to write that book for you. Find somebody else. So I don't know if it was in the same conversation, but shortly thereafter, the president of AT&T said to him, well, I'm very impressed with your ideas and about management accountabilities. And he said, so how would you like to come to work here and put those ideas into action? And Page again responded, yes, he would be interested in doing that, but he said, it has to be a policy job. I have to be involved in making policy.
Right.
And so the president of AT&T said, you're on, and on the spot made him a vice president. He went from zero to vice president in one conversation, and remained vice president until he retired. So I think it was 20 or 22 years.
Let's see. I thought he left AT&T about 1960. No,
maybe a little before 60.
Little before.
He was on the board of directors, by the way, and
right.
he remained on the board after he retired. But in any case, I want to emphasize that you and I have talked about this through the years, not about Page, but our own views. You know, public relations is about policy. It's about making policy decisions. It's
right.
about getting it right, you know. And that was the cornerstone on which people like you and me, who came along behind, you know, saw our job in the corporation.
Right.
And it's not to say that we sat around slinging policies out like Zeus hurling thunderbolts, and it's not exactly like every policy we ever suggested got adopted. But I mean, that was the cornerstone of our
right.
job.
And it's also critical where you're positioned.
Yes.
I was fortunate enough when I joined Johnson & Johnson in 1957 to begin working with the chairman and then two succeeding chairmen over the next 30 years.
Yeah.
And you had worked for how many chairmen at AT&T? Three? Three? Four?
Well, let's see, as a direct report, I worked for three. But I worked with others.
But Ed, that's the critical part of where you're positioned, close to policy making.
Yeah.
You can't be stuck down the line reporting to some marketing executive and expect to influence policy, right?
Exactly.
Ed, before we jump to the beginning of the Page Society, which I want your version of it, let's give a capsule summary of Page. He didn't finish his career at AT&T. He went on to other things, and he became a counselor and to the White House.
Yes.
Truman, I think he worked closely with.
He. This is probably I'm chastised from time to time for saying this, but or pointing this out like it's a great triumph. But the fact of the matter is that he was called down to the White House to write the announcement about the atomic bomb. But he,
the dropping of the atomic bomb in Nagasaki.
Truman's explanation.
Yeah.
But he was a a familiar figure under many presidents at the White House as a free advisor. Like every White House has its kitchen cabinet, as they say. And he was one of those people. He did, when he took his retirement at AT&T, he had been on the board since sometime in the early 30s, I think. So he remained on the board for a couple of years, and did some for-hire counseling. He also was on the boards of 3 other corporations. Chase Manhattan Bank was one of them. So he was well known in the corporate world, and he also had for a guy that made C's at Gentleman C's at Harvard, he was very interested in education and was very much involved with Teachers College at Columbia University and with Columbia itself. So he had a wide-ranging intellect
career, but it was pretty much channeled in policy, writing, and
he was the go-to guy. He was the wise man.
And the Page Society, the Arthur Page Society, did not get formed until the mid-'80s. I want to know, and I'm sure our viewers do, how that came about. Page had long since left AT&T. What was the motivation? What was the driving force and the inspiration that in the mid-'80s prompted you and I believe Jack Coaten and a few others to form the Page Society?
Well, let me take one small step backward from that. One of my early bosses is the one who introduced me to Arthur Page. He had some of his letters and memos and whatnot, and I thought, aha, this is golden stuff. I mean, all these things that we do around here in the name of public relations, which I hadn't given any thought to who thought them up or where they came from. Suddenly I find out there's a person, and his name is Arthur Page, and he instituted most of these things. So then I started looking for more Page writings, and began to collect them, myself. And as the word got around I was doing this, this was very early in my career, but people would send me stuff, that they had in their personal files and whatnot. So somewhere, I think it was about the time that I was vice president of Illinois Bell in Chicago, and I had been making many talks to the public relations department and in management meetings out in Chicago about Arthur Page, and he was as much a mystery to other people. I mean, he had come and gone, and he had institutionalized all this stuff that we were doing, but very few people were around who really knew there was such a guy. So I thought, I think we need a patron saint, so let's resurrect Page. And so Jack Coaten was working with me in Chicago at the time, and we instituted Arthur Page Awards in different categories, annual awards for employees in the PR department who did a job that was an excellent reflection of Page principles, as they came to be called. So that was number one. And then when I moved from that job to the head job at AT&T, we made that a national award. So okay, so we had something going in the name of Arthur Page. At the time of the breakup, the Bell breakup, the last meeting that we had it was an old tradition of the vice president's public relations of all the major Bell companies came together in a conference sponsored by the AT&T vice president. So one of the people in that conference, said, this is a sad day. This is the last time we'll be together. So what say we form an Arthur Page Society? Now what he had in mind was someplace to go play golf and tell, lie to each other, tell stories and whatnot. So this particular fellow, he incorporated, with the consent of everybody, but he incorporated a Page Society. And that's kind of what it was.
That's how it got started.
As a Bell Alumni Association. But it was Jack Coton who was the first to recognize and say persistently, this has no future. What there is a need for is an organization for chief public relations officers who view their jobs as Arthur Page did his, as counselors.
From various companies.
And then various companies. So then with probably more chutzpah than reality would have suggested, we reincorporated it and opened the membership up. And that led me to one Lawrence G. Foster to say that to give this outfit any credibility, we need a president of the Page Society who's not a former Bell Telephone guy. And you generously agreed. And that's what turned the big corner for the Page Society, and it lost its beginnings as an alumni association and became a serious.
Yeah, that took place. You made your sale, and I wasn't too reluctant because I recognized the importance of the Page Society, or what it could be.
Yeah, and we knew each other well.
We knew each other well. You're a tough guy to turn down anyway. But 90.
Vice versa. That works the other way too.
The other way, right? Exactly. 90 to 92, those 2 years, and what we did is we went out and we went to the top PR people in the country and said, the Arthur Page Society was born and bred in the Bell system, but now we're expanding it nationally and opening it up to other companies. Yeah. And would you join and be a part of it? I can't remember a single turnout. Right. The top people in the country in our business, public relations, wanted to be a part of it.
Yeah, there was nothing. There's still nothing quite like it exists. As you know, there was another organization that you were also president of. That was a once-a-year conference among top PR people. It's called the Public Relations Seminar, and you were also president of that.
No, but actually,
you were not.
I wasn't. No, I headed Wiseman in New York. But not the seminar.
Well, see what happens to an old man's brain. I don't remember everything accurately. Anyway, I think it was not. If Larry Foster called you up and said you ought to join the Page Society, but a lot of people said, well, if he thinks it's good, I ought to join. But the other part, I think, was that it does fill a need for many, not all, of the chief public relations officers, more so than the seminar or any other organization, because it operates it's issues focused,
Right.
and it operates at the intersection of the CEO's job and the Chief Public Relations Officer's job. That's the focus of
Right.
of the conferences.
And it has become over the years the most prestigious public relations organization in the country.
Yep. Yeah.
With now I think 330 senior level people, and with a program that and boggles my mind the programs that they have been able to put together. When what we were doing is out selling people to join, they have created a very sophisticated agenda.
Absolutely. I mean, for most senior PR people, it's a must be there organization.